So really, one of the unique things about SiteSpect is that it actually works as a reverse proxy server. So in that model, you have a layer in the middle, let's say SiteSpect, and SiteSpect is proxying the request through and then proxying the response back through. And on the response flow, SiteSpect is actually pattern matching on the content and then introducing the changes, whether they are to the HTML or even to CSS or JavaScript assets that may load within the page or may actually be served from origin. SiteSpect has the ability to manipulate that payload so that when it gets back to the browser, it is essentially fully baked. The work has been done to introduce those manipulations, again, whether it's for experimentation or personalization or both. And because this is happening before it gets to the browser, your latency is dramatically reduced because there's no third-party call-out to a separate host. All the characteristics of HTTP keep alives and things like that are retained. It's all technically first-party. The cookies that are set are server set, so they're done using a set cookie HTTP header rather than on the client. That completely avoids the ITP and ETP constraints. And because once the code actually gets to the browser, the work has been done, there is no flicker effect. So this really, from its very foundation, completely avoids those problems that you will experience with tag-based tools. So this, in essence, is the proxy. And of course, it's not just one proxy server sitting out there. There are many servers, and there are many points of presence. We'll talk about that when we get into SiteSpect Cloud Infrastructure in a subsequent segment. Now, I mentioned that in addition to the proxy, there is another mode of operation that is available, and that is what we call Engine API. The Engine API turns the SiteSpect layer into an endpoint for a REST API. So in addition to the proxy, where traffic flows through and then back through a SiteSpect node, the client as well as the server can directly connect to SiteSpect as an endpoint and get back programmatically a payload of instructions as a REST response in JSON that will basically give all the instructions that are needed either to the client layer or the server layer to execute the manipulations or track the metrics or what have you that are needed. So the API method can be used in conjunction with a proxy or can be used separate and standalone from the proxy. And in fact, for thick clients, so set-top or mobile apps where there's no HTML necessarily that's being rendered, our Engine API is the method for enabling all this functionality on those types of devices. So proxy plus Engine API are two things that you get with SiteSpect that really essentially work around these browser constraints, latency impact, as well as the potential to introduce flicker. So we solve all those problems.